Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a text that takes totally everyday concepts, things like time, financial investments, and written contracts, and uses them to explore some seriously deep, long-term existential realities. We're going to break down this profound metaphor that's honestly going to make you look at your very own long-term plans in a completely different light.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why do we invest in a retirement fund? It's something so many of us do without even a second thought, right? You take your hard-earned money you could easily blow today on a spontaneous vacation or a ridiculously expensive dinner, and you just lock it away. You willingly give up those resources in the present moment for a payoff that is literally decades away. The source text actually asks us to pause and really consider this everyday logic. We do it because we have this inherent, unshakable belief in a future reality that we're actively preparing for.
And this naturally forces us to contrast two wildly different mindsets, living strictly for today versus investing for decades later. The source poses such a brilliant question here. Why would a person who genuinely believes there is absolutely no tomorrow ever bother investing for the future? It would be completely illogical, wouldn't it? If the game ends tonight, you definitely don't save your tokens for tomorrow. So the very act of planning for the long term, that is hard evidence that we fully expect the long term to actually happen.
Which brings us right to the core metaphor of our source text, the officer's wallet. The text tells this fascinating story where a trusty friend suggests taking a really close look at a soldier's identification card, basically their official wallet. And when they examine this document, they notice something highly peculiar. You see, the rank assigned to this officer isn't just some temporary status meant for a few days. No, this documentation is heavy. It's filled with official seals, intricate stamps, bureaucratic signatures, the whole shebang. It implies a permanence and a massive infrastructure that stretches far, far beyond just the immediate moment.
And this brilliantly illustrates the central puzzle of the text. Imagine a timeline in your head. Okay, so at point A, the officer receives their rank and official identification document. But then we learn that at point B, the current square, which by the way is the text's metaphor for the physical world, or the immediate operational area we currently live in, is scheduled to close completely. The mission ends. And yet, the official document promises a salary payout at point C, a date that occurs long after the current square has already shut down.
Now, what's really fascinating about this logical deduction is what it actually implies. If the document promises a salary payout after the current world closes, well, there's really only one logical conclusion. The owner of this document is nominated for another life. They're working for another place. Just think about it for a second. Why would any authority issue such an intricate, detailed document promising future rewards if that future didn't even exist? If the current square is literally all there is, those detailed future records wouldn't just be confusing. They would be entirely 100% meaningless.
So the crucial point here is what the text calls design logic. This is the philosophical argument that detailed long-term records and contracts inherently prove the existence of a corresponding long-term reality. It's like a giant puzzle. The source material argues that designing a complex system, one filled with long-term contracts for a game that is purely short-term, would be totally inconsistent. It would be a massive flaw in the design. Therefore, the presence of a detailed long-term plan is compelling, hard evidence pointing toward a real long-term reality.
The source material then takes this philosophical framework of design logic and applies it directly to a theological conclusion. Referencing this specific verse from the Quran, the text frames the relationship between the divine and humanity as a profound long-term transaction. It objectively describes a dynamic where temporary life and wealth are conceptually purchased in exchange for the ultimate long-term reality, paradise. So the source uses that earlier metaphor of the soldier's wallet to explain that our efforts in the current world are essentially an investment for a promised, concrete future payout. Which brings us to a really thought-provoking question the source leaves us with, turning the mirror right back onto ourselves. Are you working today for something whose reward you won't see immediately? It's an incredibly powerful thought to end on. Whether we're talking about a retirement fund, a lifelong relationship, or a deeply held belief, we all make sacrifices in the present for an unseen future. The source challenges us to consider the ultimate design logic of our own lives. When you really get down to it, what do your long-term efforts ultimately make you believe in? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll leave you to ponder that exact question.